Welcome to another week of storytelling. Today I have another inspired folktale that I wrote about and I will be reading it to y'all. It's a little bit longer compared to my first folktale. So please bear with me. There's a lot of dialogue in here, a lot of like fast forwarding because it's a short story and I want it to be very short, but this is like the best I could do to cut it down without having to confuse y'all about what's happening and how fast of a time change has it been and everything like that. So I hope y'all enjoy and let's get started, right? Gao Za and Yer. Long ago, humans and dragons lived in the same world. Although they were very different, they learned to coexist. Among many tales of a human and a dragon having everlasting bonds, there is one that surpassed them all. A story about two friends who would do anything to protect the other one. Their names were Gao Za and Yer. Gao Za was a jade dragon that lives in the Green Lake, and Yer was an ordinary girl that lived in a small village near the Green Lake. They were childhood friends and grew up watching each other's back. And how they met? Well, let's just say it was pure luck. When Gao Za was but a small snake, she loved the human world and loved the games that human children played. But there was a slight problem. The children feared her. Maybe it was because of her fangs or her slithering sound, or perhaps it was her scales. Nonetheless, the children misunderstood her intentions. She was never really good at conversing with human children, so she was often bullied. But Yer, she was quite different from the other children in her village. She was a curious and loving girl who saw all beings' life meaningful and important. One day, she came upon Gao Za crying by the lake by the huge boulder after being bullied, and all Yer did was ask her a simple question. "Why are you crying? Who hurt you?" asked Yer gently. Gao Za sniffled and sadly told Yer the tale of how all she wanted to do was to be friends with a human child. "It seems that the children misunderstood you, but do not fret. I will be your friend from now on," replied Yer happily. With that simple compassion, their friendship bloomed, and they became the best of friends. They were inseparable, really. They would often talk about their dreams and wanting to travel around the two worlds. But just like any young dreams, they soon realized things never go according to plan. Gao Za was the daughter of the Jade Dragon King of the Green Lake. He made all his children attend military school at the human age of 10. And although Gao Za was but a small snake at the time, her father, the king, still wanted her to go. It would be a while before the friends saw each other again. But Yer promised her friend that she would come by the lake every day and watch to see the day her friend returns back from military school. And just like that, Gao Za returned to the lake. The dragon world was complicated. Gao Za had many siblings and parents, but above all, her relationship with her family was lonely. And as promised, her father sent her to military school to hone her skills in battle and her magical power. In the dragon world, time moves much, much slower than in the human world. Gao Za may have made many dragon friends while she attended the school, but they weren't like her dear friend Yer, who was playful, happy, and adventurous. All the dragons wanted to do was show off their skills, their lineage, and their form. And because Gao Za missed her friend dearly, she quickly excelled in military school and graduated within a year. Gao Za returned to the human world to find her friend. When Gao Za ascended from the lake, she did not see Yer, but a young lady in her 16, sitting by the lake. Hesitant and a bit timid, Gao Za slowly walked over to the young lady, who chuckled and flicked the little dragon's forehead. "Have you forgotten who I am already?" asked the young lady cheerfully. Gao Za was startled by her flick. Gao Za knew it was Yer, but it was strange to see her best friend hidden inside that mature smile. "Yer!" cried Gao Za cheerfully as she jumped at her best friend and they both fell to the ground, laughing at their awkward encounter. It hasn't been long since Gao Za had returned to her world, but within that small time frame, her friend had already become a gorgeous young lady. "It's been ages since I saw you," smiled Ze happily. Gao Zas smiled back. In her world, she was only gone for a year, but in the human world, it was almost 10 years. "Why do you look so hurt?" asked Ze worriedly as she caressed Gao Zas' slithering head. "It's just that it only took me a year before I could see you, but for you, it's been almost 10 years. Time is quite cruel," replied Gao Zas sadly. "Just because time moves faster here doesn't mean that I'll disappear anytime soon," smiled Ze cheerfully. Gao Zas wishes that that was the case, but she was afraid that if she continues to be gone for a long period of time, she may never be able to see her friend again. And so, Gao Zas made up to her friend by coming to see Ze every day when she could. But Ze had become a young adult. Her responsibility to care for her family has become more and more of a burden, and the time she could spend with Gao Zas has been cut short by her duties as a daughter. Gao Zas came up with the grandest idea. She turned herself into a beautiful young girl of 12 years old. Ze was quite shocked by Gao Zas' transformations, but nonetheless, it was a blessing in disguise. And for the next 3 months of the fall year, Gao Zas came to help Yer with her chores and preparations for the New Year Harvest Festival that lasts for 30 days. The New Year harvest has come, and it was the longest celebration that Ze looked forward to every year. And this year, Ze was looking forward to it than any other year, because Gao Zas was finally going to be able to attend. The first day of the festival was filled with the entire village coming together to watch bullfighting, eating a bountiful of harvest rice, meat, poetry, singing, and dancing. The way humans celebrated their New Year was far different from Gao Zas' family celebration. Perhaps it was because she was a king's child. She was only ever given the luxury of decors and food, with others entertaining her family. But if Gao Zas learned anything from humans, it was that they come to appreciate what they have, and they mean it too, by showing it in their faces. Gao Zas envied that kind of life. To be human was hard, but earning it was a beauty all on its own. Perhaps she's always admired humans for their hard work. She just didn't know it back then. For the past 3 months that Gao Zas learned what it meant to be human, her heart had already made it seem as though living amongst them wouldn't be so bad. Gao Zas watched the villagers entertain themselves to celebrate the coming year with their hard-earned harvest. She came to love the festivities in the crowded brings within and outside of the village. And as much as Gao Zas wishes to come every day for the next 30 days of the festival, she too had responsibilities to tend to in her world. News of her mother had fallen ill reached Gao Zas' ears. Gao Zas returned to the dragon world and took care of her mother until she recovered. Although she longed to stay in the human world a while longer, she knew that her love for her mother was also big. When Gao Zas' mother had recovered from her slight cold, Gao Zas returned back to the upper world to hear a pleasant news about her beloved friend. "You met a guy?" asked Gao Zas, a big shock to hear such a thing after a week of absence. The harvest festival had ended, and the new year was upon them. Ze slightly blushed. To think that at the age of 16 she would fall in love so quickly by the end of the harvest festival. "I honestly didn't think I'd fall in love with him," replied Ze with a cheerful smile. Gao Zas felt a bit lonely. She had always been the apple in Yer's eyes, but it seems that a total stranger had taken her friend away from her. "How did you two meet?" asked Gao Zas curiously. "It was an unexpected encounter to say. I have seen him wander around the village for the past 14 days, but he never seemed interested in the festival. But one day when I went to gather water for my gourd, he was standing by the river, lost in thoughts. I thought he was going to slip into the water, so I grabbed him and we both fell into the small creek. I felt like a fool, but after that, we started talking, and for the last 2 weeks of the festival, we spent time together," said Ze, feeling embarrassed to have fallen so easily. Gao Zas envied her friend's first love, but if anything, she was happy that Ze had found someone other than Gao Zas. "I need to meet this guy before I prove anything," teased Gao Zas cheerfully. "One of these days, I'll introduce you to him," smiled Ze happily. It was a bittersweet promise from Gao Zas, and she had no choice but to resolve her own feelings that had grown towards her best friend. so she continued to keep her feelings hidden deep inside her own heart for the rest of her life. And as the months goes by, the time Zoe and Gao Zas spent together seemed to only dwindle. Gao Zas' desperation to see her friend had grown to frustration that egged her to want to meet the suitor that Zoe had loved. Perhaps Gao Zas thought that if she met the suitor, her love for her best friend would melt away, but that was only wishful thinking. As the new months passed by, Gao Zas had become busy. Her father had appointed her as future queen of the Jade Dragons and had arranged a political marriage to a son of the Gold Dragon Kingdom who would be marrying into the Jade Dragon family. Her responsibility as queen seems to only continue to pile on, and Gao Zas found that busying herself with work was one way to cope with her broken heart. And just like that, Gao Zas learned to forget about her first love. One evening, as Gao Zas was lying in bed, exhausted of another day of work, she heard Nze's voice calling out her name in the quiet room. Without hesitation, Gao Zas emerged from the lake and saw her friend on the outskirts of the green lake. She looked exhausted and tired. "Hey," replied Gao Zas, who felt awkward that her friend had abandoned her for a while. "Hi, how have you been?" asked Yer, who was aware of the awkward atmosphere. "Busy," replied Gao Zas. They sat next to each other, staring at the moon that shined its reflection onto the lake and the stars that gleamed from the ripples of the water striders. "How are things with your lover?" asked Gao Zas curiously. "We're good. His homeland's far away from my village, but he still makes the effort to see me," replied Zoe happily. Gao Zas was just glad to know that Zoe was still with that man. "You know, I never got the chance to meet him," said Gao Zas. "Right, sorry about that," replied Zoe sadly. "Is it because I'm a dragon?" asked Gao Zas. "No, it's not like that. It's just he's never seen a dragon before in his life. He said that the dragons that lived in his country are all extinct, and his grandpa has told some scary stories about dragons. I just thought that if he met you," said Yer, "that he'd run away, that he'll never talk to you again," asked Gao Zas, a bit hurt. Zoe did not seem to oppose, which made Gao Zas question her friendship with Zoe all these years. "I thought you were different from the other children in the village," said Gao Zas sadly. "I would never lie about being your friend," said Zoe desperately, as she placed her left hand on top of Gao Zas' hand. Zoe had so many things she wished to say from the bottom of her heart, but all she could do was stay quiet. Gao Zas felt like her friend's warm embrace was all that she needed for reassurance, even if Zoe was lying. They spent a moment hugging. Gao Zas could hear Zoe's heartbeat, but soon a second heartbeat began to irregularly beat beside hers. Gao Zas was familiar with this sound. As she placed the palms of her hands onto Zoe's stomach, to Gao Zas' surprise, the distant heartbeat became clearer. "You're pregnant?" whispered Gao Zas, a bit dumbfounded. Zoe cried in tears of joy and nodded happily. "I actually came here because I wanted you to be the first person to know about my pregnancy. My love has returned home to tell the news to his family. He's going to ask for my hand in marriage, and soon I'll be wed," said Zoe with tears rolling down her face. Gao Zas cried mixed tears of joy and sadness. They both were happy, but they knew that Zoe's role as soon-to-be wife would bring her far away from her village and her friend. "When does his family plan to come talk about marriage?" asked Gao Zas sadly. "In a month's time," replied Zoe, filled with sorrow. "I won't be able to send you off properly," said Gao Zas sadly. "I promise I'll come visit you when I have my child," replied Zoe. A month wasn't enough for Gao Zas to spend time with Zoe, because she knew that Zoe would live far away from her village. Then the day arrived. Gao Zas watched from afar as a friend gets married to the man she loved. It was the first time in which Gao Zas has met Zoe's lover. He was a handsome man that the villagers applauded. From the many whispers around town, Gao Zas was able to finally know the name of the groom. His name was Nu Yao, and on the day when Zoe left her husband, she did not look back, even if she wanted to. Gao Zas returned to her world, waiting for the day her friend called her name to return back to the upper world. As the months pass by, shocking news that a dragon prince of the Red Sea has caused a wildfire in the west and was shot and killed by dragon hunters. The Red Dragon King, enraged that his son was killed, also took a human's life in exchange for his son's. The rumor spread throughout both worlds that a potential war between dragons and humans may soon come. Gao Za worked with her father to try to prevent the other dragons to avoid war, but only anger and hatred ignited. And then, one evening, Ze called out to Gao Za, and when she returned to the humans' world, she saw Ze in her mid-20s, carrying a baby in a handmade baby carrier, and a small toddler holding her mother's hand. It was the first time in which Gao Za met her friend's children. They looked very much like their mother. The 3-year-old is Yi, and the baby boy of 6 months is Bingsu, replied Ze. They spent the whole night riding on Gao Za's back, flying high above the village and mountains. Although the children were young, they loved the high sky, just like their mother who did. As dawn hovers over the horizon, the children have fallen fast asleep, giving the two friends time to talk face to face. They must be having a good dream, replied Gao Za, caressing Yi's baby hair as the small child smiled in her dreams. They had fun, thanks to you, smiled Ze happily. Gao Za had no complaint. She loved these children like as if they were her own. Hey, Gao Za, can I see your world? Asked Ze, her face sunken in. That was rather random. Why do you want to suddenly do that? Asked Gao Za. Well, you always came to me when I called, but I could never come to your world. I want to know, what's it like in your world? Replied Ze with a smile. My world is mostly covered in water. If you can't fly, you won't be able to last long. There are many dragons from different parts of the world there. Everyone's very beautiful, but short-tempered. It is a rather scary place, to be honest, laughed Gao Za. A world filled with water. It sounds beautiful, said Ze, who loved the water more than the land. You are more than welcome to visit whenever you want, said Gao Za. Your mother was human, right? Asked Ze. Yes, my father and mother met up here in the human world, and when my father had to return to his world, my mother came with him, willingly, said Gao Za. It sounds romantic, replied Ze. It's not all butterflies and rainbows. My grandparents hated dragons because father took mother away. They tried whatever they could to bring my mother back home, replied Gao Za. I also heard about what happened in the west, replied Ze sadly. The Red Dragon King has been demanding the dragon hunters to return his son's body, but the hunters claimed that the prince's body burned along with the wildfire. The Red Dragon King was so enraged that he killed the chief's son, who led the Dragon Hunter Society, replied Gao Za. I've been hearing the people in the villages whisper that a war may soon break between dragons and humans. Is that true? Can you try to stop the war? Asked Ze worriedly. My father and I have been traveling around the dragon kingdoms. Some agree with my father and I, but the others have taken the Red Dragon King's side. It's difficult to know what would happen at this point onward, replied Gao Za, feeling restless. Ze took a step back and saw that her friend has been fighting her best to avoid conflict between the two races. Yer then took her friend's head and rested onto her shoulder. You've been fighting. I'm so proud of you, replied Ze gently, as she patted Gao Za's head. It had been too long since Gao Za had heard such simple words, and she smiled. I'll make sure to protect you and your children forever, said Gao Za. Then, please be my children's godmother, replied Ze. Are you sure? Won't your husband be angry if he found out? Asked Gao Za, shocked. My husband has been far too busy these days. I'm afraid that he may forget that he even has children, replied Ze. Don't joke around. You're still young. You're going to live until you're 120 years old, replied Gao Za confidently. You're right, replied Ze happily. But not long after Ze's departure, Ze passed away. She died in her sleep, leaving behind 2 young children and her widowed husband. The funeral commenced whether her family wanted to attend or not. Gao Za was devastated to hear the news. She quickly traveled to the northern hills, which was a day's travel as a dragon, but for a person it was 12 days. She watched from the front of the gates of the village in her human form. Ze's husband was carrying the baby in his arm, and Yi was standing next to her father, unaware of what was going on. After seeing Ze's little family mourning her death, instead, Gao Za approached the little family. She greeted Ze's husband, Nuyao, for the first time. "Who are you?" asked Nuyao. "My name is Li. I'm a relative of Ze," said Gao Za. "How come I've never met you?" asked Nuyao. "I live in the Far East, so it makes sense that you've never met me," replied Gao Za with a warm smile. She then caressed the infant's head, then to Yi's head. She tried to hold her tears back, but it ran down her cheeks. Her tears then turned into pearls. When she realized that she was going to be found out, she dried her tears quickly and hid her pearl tears. "I came to pay my respects, but I don't have the heart to see her. Instead, I will protect the children from afar. Please remember that," replied Gao Za, and disappeared from the village. 2 years passed in the dragon world. Gao Za isolated herself in a hidden cave and had busied herself with work and political matters that she had forgotten about her promise. But one night, a letter arrived to Gao Za, saying that her village had been massacred and her parents had been kidnapped. Gao Za tracked her kidnapped parents back to the human world, where she came across a dark forest filled with dragon warding spells. When Gao Za entered this forest, her magical powers were depleted from her, and her dragon form transformed into a small snake. As she headed deeper, she was caught by the dragon hunters and was caged. Her parents were also present. A familiar face arose from the many hunters. It was Nuyao. "It's finally nice to meet you, Jade Princess," smiled Nuyao. Gao Za was dumbfounded. Why was he here? She never suspected that Nuyao would be a part of the Dragon Hunter Society. "Why are you here?" asked Gao Za, shocked. "I've always been here. I was raised to be a dragon hunter, and I never thought in all my life that I'd let you, a dragon, slip by me," replied Nuyao. "What are you talking about?" asked Gao Za, completely confused by the situation. 30 years ago, I came to the village to slay a dragon for my coming age ceremony, but instead, I met Ze, replied Nuyao. "Right, you fell in love," replied Gao Za. "No, that's where you're wrong. She never loved me. She'd always loved you. Perhaps it's because she made a hollow promise 30 years ago that she couldn't keep, that the grief of her friend's passing was too overwhelming, that she had no confidence to face the children." "So, you're the dragon that cast an evil spell on Mother," replied Bingsu, in a monotone voice. I would never do something so cruel. I loved your mother," cried Gao Za. "Dragons live in the sea while humans walk on the land. They were never meant to be together," replied Yi. "But Ze and I defy such a taboo. Because to each other we are more than just a human and dragon. We are friends," replied Gao Za. The words did not reach the children, and Gao Za had no intention of harming her friend's children. The hunters intend on finishing the war of the dragons, and just when they were going to end Gao Za's life, a bright light shined brightly above from the sky, where Gao Za was transported into a rice field, ready to be harvested. In the middle of the field, Gao Za saw Ze standing in front of her, dressed in her best clothes. Yer became a goddess. Gao Za held on to her breath. She started to cry tears of joy and sadness, and once they shared a cup of tears, they sat underneath the open bamboo hut, as Yer told her the truth that she never told her friend. "You've been through a lot," replied Ze, as she patted Gao Za's back. Gao Za wouldn't stop crying. It was a moment she wanted to last forever. "Are you doing well?" asked Gao Za, still in tears. Ze felt conflicted. She felt horrible for leaving her friend without many answers to her troubled heart. "I'm sorry for leaving you, but even after I died, I still watched over you, and although I couldn't touch or tell you the things you wanted to hear most, I'm glad to finally be able to tell you that you've done well," replied Ze. "Once again, you've saved me," replied Gao Za. "You are my friend. I'll always take care of you," replied Ze. "Why did you do it?" asked Gao Za. Ze let out a sigh. "On the day of the New Year festival, I overheard Nuyao talking to his acquaintance. about slaying a great dragon. I was afraid he would target you because you traveled to and back from both worlds. So I confronted him, made him fall in love with me, blinded his ambition, and I married him. Although I bear no love for him, I told myself to stay strong, in order to protect you, and if I had the chance to do it over, I'd still choose the same path, replied Zas. But you sacrificed your entire life. You always loved to be free. I felt like a fool for not being able to help you, replied Gao Za opposingly. After I had my children, I convinced myself that they would be different from their father. I wanted my children to know that dragons and humans can be together. But my life was cut short, and my children were manipulated, replied Zas sadly. And again, their time together fell short like always. It seems like no matter how much they wished to converse, time always forbid it. Gao Za returned to Earth with bittersweet feelings. She decided that it was time to put an end to everything. To avoid further bloodshed, she cried for a week, causing the sea to rise and flooded the lands. And for the surviving humans, she offered them a new start, which they gladly took. She then cast a spell upon herself, along with the other dragons, into a deep sleep. Their bodies remained dormant, becoming the mountains, the trees, and the land that humans now live. This way, humans and dragons can live together in harmony without imposing on each other's world. Thank you everyone, that was my story of Gao Za and Yer about friendship, loyalty, and pretty much about love too. So if y'all enjoyed that little short story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will see y'all next week for another short story. So bye!